A Sankarshan Joshi trip.
First of all, thank you so much for doing this. It's been such a long waiting for me to have you on the podcast, but finally we are doing this. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for being here.
My pleasure, bro. My pleasure. It's been a while as well. I was also trying to sort out things, but it's been just bit here and there. So it's
Yes,
good
yes.
to catch up with you again.
So usually I
Right.
do the introduction of the guest, even before the episode airs initial part, I do it. But when I
Right.
was about to do your research, I saw your achievements, and then I didn't want to miss out on any of your achievements and progress. So could you please do the honors for me? Could you please introduce yourself for all the people who don't know you?
Right. So I am working as a researcher for a think tank called Observer Research Foundation. So I just started this gig recently, and I've been working on India's neighborhood, foreign policy, and conflicts precisely. So I did my master's in international relations, precisely focusing on India-Pakistan relations and India's neighborhood, and also happenings in Kashmir. So that's my core focus for now, and that's what I'll be doing even with the organization that I'm trying to work for.
Okay, that sounds so fancy. For the first time when I heard you on Manish Ekdal's podcast Matukate, and when he
Right.
did your introduction, I was like, holy smokes, this sounds so profound and but the conversation did justice to your background too. Whoever's listening, you can go check that out too. I leave in the description below. Uh, I know we are running short on time right now, so I'm just I'll try to keep this conversation crisp.
Definitely.
Even before we get into what's happening in Afghanistan and Taliban, could you please enlighten us on why is it important for countries to have relationship? We all are aware of the Indian politics, right? There is politics on a very large scale. There is politics on a very world level, where it's between the countries. So could you enlighten us about why is it important to have relationship with countries and that politics?
Well, let's put it this way. It's in a way just say that more than countries, we live in nation states, and nation states are nothing but equivalent to countries. That's how we put it in political science. But yeah, and precisely, we live in societies. No one wants to live alone. No one wants to live by themselves, and that's why you probably need to have someone or the other. And in a world where you are determined by just say 196, 197 member states, you always have to have some good interaction. You need to have some good conversation with member states, because no one, especially in this globalized world, can live as a pariah. Let's say what's happening in North Korea today. What happened with Afghanistan in 1996 to 2001. So basically, you can't restrict people, you can't restrict goods from coming in. You need people to interact, you need people to move out, you need people to come in. You need your ideas to go out, you need your goods to come in, your goods to go out. So that's how nation states survive. Even as empires, as kingdoms, this has been happening for ages. No one see if human beings cannot be constrained in one area, you need to interact with others. Go back to tribes, they interacted with others because no one wants to live in a closed society, no one wants to be as a pariah. And that's why precisely you would want a nation state. You want to interact with a fellow nation state or countries, be a hostile, be it friendly, be it neutral, be it best friends, however you want to term it. So that's why it's important to have some kind of relationship with the others.
Yes, and
Right.
also, with whatever's happening in Afghanistan, right? I always had my tentacles up, something always found fishy there. Even in the past, whatever has been conflict among countries, there's been world wars, and there've been a lot of wars happening between a lot of countries, and America has always been a center of conflict in some or the other way. It either promoted conflict, or in the name of peace it somehow promoted, or it instead of went for war. Some in some or the other way, America has always been a part. So it's even with Afghanistan, right? Could you also tell what's happening in Afghanistan? I just we can just take a left turn here and we can brief about that before we get into this
Yeah, yeah,
American thing.
sure. Sure. I mean, before we start, it's just one thing. No, it's been America for now. Before that, it was Britain. Before that, it was Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire. Before that, there was the Romans. There, that has been the part and parcel of the world. The one who has power will rule. The one who has power will try to impose peace, no matter how fraud it is. And the one who has power, who has money, will always try to dominate the other, be it human beings, be it empires, be it kingdoms, be it nation states. What happened with Britain, it did the same thing. What happened if Soviet Russia had been successful after the Cold War, it would have been the same, and it had done the same thing with its neighbors in Central Asia and fellow Central Asian countries and Soviet countries. So that's one thing you need to know. Yes, today America is on the top of the power, which it is declining. So probably you blame America for it, and probably 10 years or 5 years down the line, you will be blaming China for whatever it's doing around the world, trying to impose its politics, trying to impose peace, however fraud it might be again. So that's how it works. And so let's come back to Afghanistan. So the major part of Afghanistan starts from its geography. If you notice, Afghanistan is a landlocked country stuck between Iran and Pakistan. And in addition to it, what's important is, unfortunately, Afghanistan has always been at the center of empires or kingdoms or nation states, right? Historically, you go back to time when the Tsarist Empire of Russia was expanding. At one point of time, we had the British Indian Empire in South Asia. So the British used Afghanistan as a buffer zone to keep Soviets out. So it's ultimate that even Soviets the Tsars wanted to have an influence in Afghanistan, and then came the Britishers, and then came the Soviet Union, which wanted to expand its influence beyond Afghanistan and move to South Asia. But it didn't happen the way it was supposed to be. And that's why Afghanistan is always called a graveyard of empires. So for the past 100, 200 years, if you notice, Afghanistan has always been key part of contest and power politics and inclusion of different nation states that it has always been with. So if that precisely answers your question.
Yes, and also like Afghanistan has a lot of like resources in it, right? Like there's a lot of like minerals, there's a lot of natural resources, which a lot of like which countries could capitalize over. So it's been a largest manufacturer of opium, right? And like for like all the neighboring countries have always had the keen interest to like take over Afghanistan and maybe capitalize over the opium market there. So the current crisis has anything to do with opium, or like to capitalize over that? Like why do you think this crisis started in the first place?
Right. So more than just saying it's opium, there's something called a resource curse, right? And generally, when you have a resource curse, that say you are rich in a way that in if you put in a common man's perspective, you are rich. Then you have a group of thugs or a group of individuals, unprivileged individuals, who want to exploit you, right? Who want to take the resources that you have. That genuinely happens with societies, with nation states. It's the same with Afghanistan. But the most unfortunate part of Afghanistan is that more than things coming from outside, it's from within. So more than other countries trying to invade Afghanistan for resources, most of them have invaded, as I said, for a buffer zone, for political reasons, rather than resources itself. Because we only discovered the US only discovered the resources in Afghanistan, that it had $1 trillion worth of resources only in 2010 and early 2000. But this conflict with Afghanistan has been happening even before that, right? So that's why you need to see, the point is, Afghanistan externally was more of a political, especially if coming from different countries. But internally, yes, there was a lot of resource curse happening. Taliban or any other terrorist organization, or even warlords, militias, everyone wants to have some control over the resources, have some control over the opium, because opium is always a good commodity to make profits with. So that has been something within. So, but if you go back to the question, where did this all begin? This all again starts from the basic conception that Afghanistan is a buffer state. Okay, its geography is closely located to Pakistan or say Russia or Central Asia, Iran. So that's what complicates today's Afghanistan. That's what complicated even yesterday's Afghanistan. So that's where the whole conflict began, and that's where it is precisely going on this way. Now, let's just quickly go back with this whole theory of the political perception of Afghanistan being a domino or being a sphere of influence for nation states. So back in 1970s, as I said, there was this Soviet influence piercing in through Afghanistan's domestic structure. They wanted a new political government which was so communist in its nature to establish a communist government within Afghanistan, which was quite seen very uneasily by the US, by Pakistan, and also to some extent by Iran, because they didn't want a communist regime within Afghanistan. They didn't want communism to pass through this close. So what they did rather were they, and especially Afghanistan has been a very conservative society starting from ages. The tribes, the ethnic rivalries, they have been conservative. They have been sticking to their Islamic identity quite precisely quite keenly more than any other nation state that you would have seen at that point of time. So what Pakistan and US did rather, along with Saudi Arabia, they started funding Afghans, locals, and they started training them in madrasas, radicalizing them so that they could fight against the Soviet Union and could throw them out. And then Afghanistan could itself be secured from communism. So this was the whole plan. It happened to be that it worked out quite efficiently. The Soviets were thrown out. By 1989, Afghanistan was not having any Soviet presence, just like it doesn't have any US presence right now. But it did have, a problem of local government being led by Soviets again, or by the Communist Party of Afghanistan. And apparently what happened was it was a weak government which couldn't have sustained without Soviet support. So then we see a civil war breaking out, and then we see Pakistan upping its cards and saying, okay, this is a civil war and we're going to make the best out of it. And then they they push a faction called Taliban. And right from there, the whole story begins. 1992 to 1996, Afghanistan is in a whole civil war by different warlords, different kind of military factions, and then comes the Taliban, and it is quite efficient. By 1996, it establishes its own government, and it's there till 2001. But Taliban, if you notice, it's Islamist in its nature, but also tribal in its nature. It sticks very strong to its ethnic identity of being Pashtun. So there's a tradition in Pashtun, ethnics or tribes, that if someone asks you for for an amnesty, or someone asks you to stay within the country as a guest, you're obliged to give them that residual place, no matter how bad the person is. So the same happened with Al Qaeda, who resided, especially Bin Laden, who planned to stay in. I mean, there was always a lot of economics and politics that went behind. But at the end of the day, when the US said after 9/11 that we want, Bin Laden out of Afghanistan, Taliban just said no, because that's our culture. We respect our culture. We want people. We respect our traditions of looking after our guests, and Bin Laden is our guest, and we won't let him in. So that began this phase where the US entered 2001. The war went on. They defeated Al Qaeda quite easily, but there's always a porous zone between Afghanistan and Pakistan. So obviously, most of the leaders from Al Qaeda and Taliban were bombed, and most of them left to Pakistan. They took a safe sanctuary in Pakistan for quite a long time, and then they waged a guerrilla kind of warfare. Starting from 2007 to 8, back they started controlling this place. So obviously it was quite difficult for the US in first case to defeat a regime whose geography is so difficult, whose people are like always so indulged in tactical warfare, guerrilla movements. And second, it was again difficult for the West or say for the democratic country to establish itself into a society that has been traditionally very conservative, very inclined towards their own religion, towards their tribal values. So the US gets itself stuck for 20 years trying to build a nation, which apparently doesn't happen. And whatever happens, as we saw, just went out in 20 days. So that's where the story began, and apparently that's where the story is heading right now. So it's not the end. We'll still see a lot of resistance coming in the coming days. So let's see what's gonna happen with Afghanistan in the coming days as well.
Yes, and also like you said, like 20 years back is when America entered Afghanistan, right, with the whole purpose of defeating Bin Laden. And they stayed, like their trained military troops, they stayed in Afghanistan for over 20 years. Like, even though like they kept building like new narratives to stay there, they found new reasons to continue to stay there. And so like, why did they stay for 20 years there? Because the information has been not very much public, and like not a lot of people know about like why American troops stayed in Afghanistan for like 20 years.
See, again, multiple factors behind it. One, because they didn't want China or any other country, especially Russia, to bounce back into these territories. I mean, it was not just an how do you say it was not just an attack or just an invasion, but also ideologically or establish any kind of influence within this region, especially in Afghanistan. One, um, and second, because if a country has to survive, it has to survive on a narrative that someone is your enemy, right? Someone is there, and that's how you unite your country. Today, if India is united against one country, you know which country it is. So we have a common enemy to survive. If Pakistan has to survive, it has one or two enemies as such to survive. If Bangladesh has to survive, it has always used, although not very aggressively, but it always has this kind of nationalism where it says, I'm threatened by India, I'm scared of India. Similar thing, Nepal, Sri Lanka, a lot of other small countries do it with their big neighbors. A lot of countries do it with other countries. So every nation has a kind of threat that they stick on to. Right? What happened after the Cold War? That was how it ended. Like 1991, the US had no new enemies to make, and apparently, yeah, it was a tough thing. Like you kill 3,000 innocent people of yours, and no public is gonna sit and take it very lightly. They're gonna say they let her kill. What are you gonna do about it? So that's where it began. I mean, and also US has this deep obsession. That's the second thing, and the third thing you would always say is the US has quite a deep obsession of showing its power. Right? It's not just US, but every nation state, every kingdom has done it. So the US was also foolish enough to believe that it can, penetrate its ideology within this unknown terrain, unknown country, and establish a democratic system. It has this habit of holding on to its values, ironically, to democracy and to human rights, which it did. So that's where, you can say multiple reasons were behind this US, standing behind. And also the fourth thing might be with, a bit of war profits that come from, that's what you call blood money. Like you send your troops, and also you send the contractors from your country. You basically provide them with employment, and then your war lobbying machine is behind you, especially the US industries, which makes a lot of weapons, which makes a lot of bomb equipments, ammunition. So they have something to make profits on, and that's where Afghanistan comes ahead or Iraq comes ahead. And again, as the Cold War world order broke down, the new world order was defined by who are civilized, who are uncivilized, who are terrorists, who are civilians. And the only way nation states can survive is by killing the terrorists or the ones who threaten our globalized world, or however you want to put it. So yeah, multiple reasons behind it, and precisely as expected, it was about to fail. A lot of people told then, a lot of people told after that, but that's how countries are.
So like, when the America decided to take back, right, like when they decided to step back and like bring back all the troops, like bring all the power back, so that's when the Taliban's power escalated, right? Like that's when they came up. So like I'm wondering, is this a coincidence, or did they know that this is gonna happen? Like when America decided that they wanted to bring this back, is this a cause and effect? Like did Taliban waited until the American troops left so that they can seize power, or did America leave so that the Taliban would come? Like I'm just so confused with this.
No, I mean, you can put a few things, I mean, as it comes and go. But no, I don't think the US withdrawal itself led to the Taliban's resurgence. Taliban's resurgence happened way back in 2008 or 9, when they were they immediately up as and when US invaded against Al Qaeda and Taliban. The Taliban were kicked out within days of their government, and then they established a new democratic, so-called democratic government within Afghanistan. So the Taliban basically withdrew into shadows of Pakistan, the northwest frontiers of Pakistan, and that's where they built their whole sanctuaries of terrorism again and again. And by 2007, 2008, they were back. By 2011, 2012, Taliban has completely reformed itself into guerrilla organization, IEDs, rocket launchers, bombings, guerrilla attacks, ambushes. Quite a lot of things happened, and the areas controlled by the government drastically, either they fell completely to Taliban, or rather than actually they started falling periodically to Taliban, or they were being competed by Taliban. So the US quite knew it. And there's this leak by Washington Post, I presume. I think that was called Kabul Papers. So there was something, there was a wild belief, not even belief, there was always evidence that the US has always been failing in its nation building machine, in its nation building mission in Afghanistan. But the US wasn't ready to, digest it. One, yeah, because they didn't want the China or Russia to come in. Two, they didn't want their ego to be down. If they let go tomorrow, every nation state will question their power. Third, they always wanted an enemy to survive on war lobby. As I said, it took so long for the US to realize. But again, when and how your domestic public opinion changes, when they start questioning you, like, what actually are you doing in Afghanistan? What's your purpose of going to Afghanistan? That's when your leaders also start, wagging their tails to what the public opinion says. And precisely this debate had been happening since 2014, 2015. Barack Obama was of the opinion that, by 2009 and 10, the US troops increased from 30, 40,000 to 90,000 in Afghanistan. Why was this? Because he said we are going to completely destroy the enemy and then we are going to withdraw by 2014, 2013. It didn't happen. And similarly, NATO forces were there. They also said the same thing. By 2014, NATO operations were wrapped up, but the terrorism problem still prevailed. So I don't think the US, the US didn't have that capacity to survive there for long. I mean, even if they did, they would have still seen themselves failing day in and day out. So that's why I think it was better, or they decided it was better to leave Afghanistan as and when it goes. Again, second thing you need to also look at is the shifting priorities. At that point of time, Central Asia, for US, holding Central Asia, holding on to Iran, threatening Russia was something important. Holding Middle East was something important. But now the world system has changed. Now threat has changed. We have moved. US has moved from looking at Russia as a threat to China as a threat, right? The US has moved from making the Middle East as a chess battleground to making Indo-Pacific region as the battleground. So we see this shift happening from one place to the other place, and that's why precisely you could also argue that the US had no, real interest in staying in this region as and when China started, growing into a big power.
Yes, and also let me just give you the reason why I've been so uh interested in America being the center of this conflict, because America is the largest weapon manufacturer, right? Like it makes and it distributes a lot of weapons, and it has a history of giving out weapons to countries, right? And it has a record of giving the weapons to the wrong hands. So it's
Mm.
so it somehow ends up the weapons which were meant for their allies, it always ends up in the hands of enemies, and they end up using that and overpowering the allied nations of America, right? So this didn't happen once or twice, it keeps happening in series, and this repeats. So so this makes me wonder if this is what they're looking for. Like, has this been their plan in the first place, to like have allied countries and then like empower the enemies to like take over the allies? Like, this is a very like weird conspiracy, but
So you say the US had been supplying its weapons to its allies to empower them.
in the name of peace, I yes, like lending power or like selling that. Like it sold weapon to Iraq also, right? Like before
Right.
they became their like enemies in a sense. But like yeah, this is what I am thinking.
Okay, so I'll put it this way. Okay, there is a very common belief in international relations, the discipline, that there are no friends. There are nothing called permanent friends in international relations. There's nothing called permanent friends in foreign policy. There's only something called national interests. And the national interest might be anything: ensuring it's your survival, ensuring your neighbors respect you, and ensuring that you're the world power, anything as such, right? The Taliban armed Mujahideen, Taliban armed anti-Soviet forces in the Pakistan, and the same Mujahideen evolved into Taliban, and today they hold American arms, right? Similar thing. Okay, Iraq. Iraq was like a good friend, and all of a sudden it was selling during the Iraq-Iran war. It was selling n number of weapons to both the sides, and all of a sudden, when you see Saddam Hussein has already turned against you, and now that it attacked basically one of your friends, or it attacked one of the nation states, everything changed. And why Iraq attacked? That's national interest. That was in interests of Iraq. Might be for good, might be for bad. Again, there is no morals in international politics. Again, as far as the first myth goes. So that's how it happens. I mean, they sold a lot of arms to Libya. They, for heaven's sake, they even sell a lot of arms to Pakistan, right? And then Pakistan sends these arms to the terrorist organization, and evidently, um, America steps in again. They fund Pakistan again to kill these terrorists, and they kill these terrorists, and evidently they get these arms back. It's a lot of uh, to and fro, and a lot of things happen. And especially, but when it comes to snatching weapons, or your rivals taking control of your weapons, it's been a basic tactic of warfare. If you see someone who is having a better weapon than you, you will steal it. I mean, more than stealing it, you once you defeat the person, you would want to take that weapon, because you don't want someone else to attack you, right? You want to defend yourself better, and that's how it has worked. Where did the Afghans in 1800s, late 1800s, get their guns? The British Empire brought them. They stole it from the British, and then they threatened the British away by the Third Anglo-British War. That's how it happens. Your enemies always tend to take your weapons. And as I said again, there is nothing permanent, right? As a friend, there's always a permanent interest. For Afghanistan, for Taliban, or for Pakistan, permanent interest has been entrenching a deep state within Afghanistan, threatening India, having a control over Kashmir, and that's its permanent interest forever. So its friends have systematically changed from US to China, and now moving closer towards Russia, and again now holding back to Taliban. So it keeps on changing. Okay, but again, there's nothing that's permanent. That arm that goes there, the arm will come back here. This arm goes there. So it's a lot of to and fro. A lot of things happen, and a lot of things happen in secret as well.
So it's like they make money selling weapons, right? Like they make money selling arms,
US.
and the more the conflict, the more weapons the countries would need, right? So in a way that like America, like US, like it profits over war, right? Like it's very literal, because like that's the product, and that product will be in demand in the time of crisis, like a war, right?
See, again, I wouldn't say yes to that question. Yes, the lobby plays quite a good role. The lobby plays a positive role, but that doesn't mean that the US would want to employ something that definitely goes against its national interest. So it's in a way saying that, how would I put it in a very common way? Just say that the US, right? So just imagine the gun laws within the US itself, right? So if the US says, okay, since I can sell more weapons to my own people, they can kill themselves. They wouldn't do it, because they still have some kind of restrictions, although very debatable, but they all very lenient restrictions as well. But still, they try to restrict it in some way or the other, because they say this is against our national interest for our own people to kill our own people. It's the same way. Iraq and Iran fought in 1980. Um, um, they said, we don't have anything to do. Iraq is neutral to us. Iran is neutral to us. So let them fight, and whatever happens, let it happen for time being, and let it go with the flow. The same thing probably it happened on the other side with China or with India. At this point of time, the US would probably supply more weapons to India than it could ever do to China. Or say Israel would supply more weapons to India than to Pakistan, because that's where your national interests are with India, not its arch rival, right? So yes, there's a weapon lobby, there's a conflict economy, there's a war economy that grows within, but no, not in contradictory to your national interests. There might be some people, some agents, like your industries or like your secret agencies or your own army, your own police forces, who want to trade the weapons for better money, for better side income, black money, etc., etc. But no, the state in itself would sell weapons, but yeah, always keeping in mind their national interests.
Hmm. And like China is the next threat to power to like US, right? Like it has its roots in a lot of countries' economy, and it is a threat to its power. And so like foreseeing, what do you think would the future would look like? And like before you answer in the world perspective, uh, could you like give closure on the Afghanistan scene right now? Like, what would the next course of action be like? Like, what's the future for Afghanistan right now?
Okay. The future of Afghanistan looks quite bleak. So at this point of time, we had promises coming in from the West saying that, oh, we need an inclusive government from the Taliban, and everyone seems to change their opinion all of a sudden. The Iranian government especially made a dialogue saying that, okay, we didn't expect Taliban to attack Panjshir in this way, right? The Iran made a new turn on it. The Iranian president is going to Tajikistan on his first visit. The Pakistan seems to be the only happy country, at least for now, with Taliban. China's being very calculative as well. Russia's being very calculative as well. But again, Russia is being very cautious at the same point of time. They did meet. They did meet India on the basis of having a negotiation or Taliban, and the US have made some concerning comments. UK has made some concerning comments. So it's obvious again. Things are looking a bit bleak for this moment, because all those promises, the new Taliban 2.0, the liberal Taliban, whatever crap these people came up with, it's obviously not working. And Panjshir has still stood. There's a lot of disputed evidences coming that one says the allies have been defeated and Taliban has taken complete control, and some others says no, resistance is still fighting. So it's now that you see another game unfolding, because now that people are coming to realize, or nation states are at least starting to realize, that the Taliban is not something that they wanted it to be. So they will try funding other groups, other organizations, and see how it goes. I mean, it's going to take a bit of 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, you don't know, but it's still going to take a while. But whenever it takes a while, it's going to take a wild turn. And also, the current government is very, again, Pashtun oriented in Taliban, which is non-inclusive of other minorities. So that's again a concern for several neighboring countries.
So, what was the incentive for Pakistan to create Taliban, like this terrorist organization? So, I actually had a question for you regarding like why do this terrorist organization like form in the first place? But then, I like this is what my assumption is. It's because like it's like government and like let's say Pakistan is secretly funding Taliban for like in some of the other way so that the Pakistan would benefit out of it, right? So
No, I get the question. It's not secret funding; it's open funding. Everyone knows it. The ISI chief was there a few days ago. No, but as far as it goes, see, again, there are two things. One, the Pashtun tribes that live in Pakistan, Pashtun tribes that live in Afghanistan, had some kind of Pashtun nationalism over Pakistani or Afghani nationalism at some point or the other. And there was a wild belief, not belief, there was a wild movement in 1970s where the Pashtun tribes of Afghanistan actually wanted to create a Pashtunistan, where Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan would be a part of broader Afghanistan. That was the whole aim. Apparently, the movement died out probably because of Pakistan. So what happened in the meanwhile? Pakistan said we are going to train a force of Pashtuns who are going to be loyal to Pakistan than to this so-called democratic government within the Afghanistan. So that's where the first incentive began, that they don't want anyone to raise the Pashtunistan issue. The second thing is obviously at that point of time it was to avoid communist Russia to come into the South Asian frontiers. So that was one thing that Pakistan did at that point of time. Now it has always transformed to um, you know just say in this way that one is a Pashtunistan issue and the second one is also about power politics. And now Pakistan has gained a whole lot of relevance, which it wouldn't have otherwise. A lot of countries are now talking to Pakistan because they realize that's the only way to go through Taliban. Third thing, they get a sanctuary to push their Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, whatever crap they have created for so long, into Afghan frontiers, Afghan territories. Fourth thing, they can question India's, India has been funding Northern Alliance for quite a while, since 1996 to 2001. That was the group of alliances that took against Taliban within that civil war time. So, and Pakistan had been sponsoring Taliban. So this is a kind of power war that broke out. And also, Pakistan is quite anxious of losing one more of its provinces. That's the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, like it lost Bangladesh long back. So it has been scared ever since that it's going to lose another territory. It's not going to survive as a nation. So that's why it wants to keep a firm control over Afghanistan. And also all the drug money, the weapons that come in. You also create a kind of leverage point with these terrorist organizations. See, now the US is talking to you, the UK is talking to you, even India is trying to talk. India is trying to maintain decorum on LOC, doesn't want to have any more skirmishes. That's how you create a leverage point, and they have done it quite efficiently in a bad way.
So are Taliban independent or like answerable and dependent on Pakistan right now?
I would put it, it's a mix of things, because Taliban is not a homogeneous entity as a lot of people make it to be. Uh, Quite a few people. There is this military wing that is quite loyal to Pakistan. There is this political wing that's called the Qatari or Doha Taliban, which is which is loyal to Pakistan, but not to the extent that Pakistan want them to be. So they have some kind of autonomy. Again, you have Haqqani network, which is basically a product of Pakistan, that is part and parcel of Taliban. So they do listen to Pakistan. And then you have the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is again part of Taliban, which claims it to be a close ally of Taliban, but it doesn't want to listen to Pakistan. And TTP or Tehreek-e-Taliban has been one of the major challenges that Pakistan has ever faced since. So, yeah, I mean, it's quite a mixed up picture. But again, the ISI chief was there. So he has made sure that the Doha batch or the Doha group of Taliban has not gone that enough of control over the current government. So that's how they have put others in charge, or the interim president, prime minister of the this thing has been pushed from Pakistani side.
Hmm. So has India has to do anything with the current situation? Like, what is India's role right now in the global politics in the current situation, considering like Taliban or Afghanistan? Do we have a role?
We do have a role in Afghanistan, a big one. We spent like billions of dollars leveraging our soft power, building infrastructure in Afghanistan since 2001 after the Taliban government did fall. And Afghanistan is our neighbor. If you go through it legally, that's the Pakistan occupied Kashmir is the immediate neighbor of Afghanistan, and that's how we have been separated. But either way, we still have that leverage. It's still our neighbor. So we do have a major role to play, and obviously you don't want your terrorist organization, or say the terrorist organization that are threatening you, to be safe and harbored in your neighboring country itself. So that's again a threat to you. So you don't want that to happen. You don't want China, Pakistan, Afghanistan to create a nexus. So a lot of things at stake for India. And for now, India is doing one thing: just wait and watch what's happening. Is trying to talk to multiple people, although a bit late. But yeah, it's still trying to engage with these people. But unfortunately, it has still given up on its Northern Alliance for now. Probably if the Northern Alliance emerges, so comes back as a phoenix, then probably things might change in coming days. But for India, it's just wait and watch, and now it's meeting a lot of stakeholders. Apparently, India was isolated for a long time from what's happening in Afghanistan through the Western powers, Russia, US, and now everyone wants to have a leverage with India, and India is trying to do vice versa. So it's quite complicated to say, but I hope it works out. And it's all a wait and watch game for India
Do we have an
as well.
ally right now in this current situation? Like, is there any country that would like support India or anyway, or are we independent with this whole like scene right now?
See, it differs again. India's traditionally been a non-aligned country. So non-aligned as in not really depending on anyone. It has always stayed away from alliances. It has always stayed away from military alliance, and it makes its independent foreign policy for itself. And that's why it takes its pride in regional power. That's why it takes its pride in being the South Asian leader, whatever you may call it. And that's how India is going to make its future foreign policy as well. Yeah, probably you might want to coordinate with USA because now you dislike the Taliban, but at the same point of time you didn't coordinate with the USA when it was withdrawing from the Afghanistan, because you knew it would be a security threat to you. Again, it all depends on national interest. For now, it's moving closer towards the West because it sees that they are also a bit skeptical of the Taliban than Russia or China has ever been. So yeah, it's how it's gonna unfold in the coming months too, and it's trying to have some kind of role, which I presume it deserves because it's its neighborhood, and we can never ignore a neighborhood for any reason.
For a really long period of time, we didn't have like India, we didn't have any conflict with any other country, right? Like which like threatened our like existence and like livelihood. So
Right.
like we are playing very safe right now, right, with respect to like we are avoiding as much conflict as possible. So do we have any threat in near future or like anytime?
Quite a few. China, obviously, one. The emergence of Taliban has will research a lot of terrorist networks. Al Qaeda, Indian subcontinent will try to reactivate itself. Which, if it happens, a lot of threat from Bangladesh, from Sri Lanka, and from Maldives might turn out to be. Then we always have Pakistan. So that's another threat. So we have a couple of threats, and no nation state is absolutely safe unless you live in a very polarized kind of or isolated kind of world. So you do have your priorities, you do have your risks, and also Kashmir, which has always been on a boiling point. So that's another risk which India will try to look forward or try to deter. And then we have Northeast, which is again boiling as usual. So quite a lot of things are happening in the security aspects as well, and China is trying to surround India on multiple fronts through the string of pearls operation. So the tactic of string of pearls. So that's how we are confronted in multiple ways. But no nation state is absolutely safe, and especially with regional powers like India, you can never say you're completely safe. And when you have failed states and failed governments like Pakistan and Afghanistan next door, it's always a risky place to relax and sit down and say that we have no threats to conquest or conquer against.
Yes, it's been such a like empowering conversation. Like, thank you for enlightening us. And I know like you're running on a very like tight schedule right now, and I feel like there is a lot to talk with you. So I hope I like you'd be back again, and we'll have like we can extend our call. And thank you so much for being here, man.
No, thank you for inviting me, and it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, I am looking forward to
Yes,
have you back again. So once again, thank you so much.
definitely, definitely, sure. Thank you. See ya.
This podcast is now recorded on video as well as audio. You can find the audio version on Spotify, JioSavan, and Ghana. If you want to look at me, if you want to look at my beautiful face, then you can come to YouTube and you can just look at me. So, if you want to ask me a question or be a part of this podcast, then make sure you follow me at a Sankarshan Joshi trip on Instagram. So I keep putting like polls where you can answer my question or you can ask me a question. So you get to be a part of this podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much once again. Hope you guys had fun.
See you soon.
A Sankarshan Joshi trip.